So drowning victims, the way that they would try to revive drowning victims was to actually blow smoke up their ass.
Probably, you could stick anything up a drowning victim's ass and it would maybe wake them up, right?
If they're still alive, they're going to have a reaction.
So somebody washes up on the beach or somebody drowns, people smoking cigarettes, they call them over, or do they build a bonfire, or where do they get the smoke from?
I know.
That's a good question.
Did it ever work?
I don't think so.
It's time for another episode of Charbroiled Chats.
My favorite topic to explore is, I guess, the dark and macabre. Everything from true crime, serial killers, to medical oddities, grotesque. And what I love about diving into these topics is just how it impacts people's lives. So things that you just take for granted today, but you had no idea had such a massive impact. And having a history background, of course, I just love having the full picture and understanding of everything. So I'm constantly gathering little tidbits of information that I didn't know, and then I love sharing that when it comes up in casual conversation. Somebody says, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, actually, did you know? And a lot of the time they tell me, I wish I didn't know that. Thank you.
I love factoids. Doesn't matter what it is. It's just...
The thing is with Kelly, it goes way beyond the factoid, right? It's like the encyclopedia of one factoid. And just to let you know, I know it seems like I was forbidden not to speak, but I'm going to speak anyway. Kelly was my work daughter because, and I think we're similar in this, people see us initially and they think, like, I've had many, many people say to me, I thought you were so, I shouldn't say this. I thought you were so professional, or I thought you were so, buttoned up or whatever.
Gee, I never heard anyone say that when we worked together.
I have heard it a lot.
Oh, okay.
But, the thing is, when we worked together, it was like, we were in the company of all crazy people, so you could be crazy, right?
Right.
But, like, when I went to the museum that I worked at, I remember the curator saying to me, I thought you were so, buttoned up, and then I realized you have a dark side. And the thing is, so Kelly and I gravitate to each other for that reason. But then also, Kelly is like shorter than I am, I think, right? I'm 5'1".
We're about the same height.
About the same. Okay. But she's teeny, she has a very youthful face, right? And when her hair's down, it's like usually has little soft curls and stuff. And she looks like, just a very modest young woman. And then you find out that she's nuts. So for Kelly and me, it's really like we have so many things that we think alike about.
And actually, Grace's birthday is the day before mine. So we're birthday twins and work mother and daughter. Although we don't work together anymore. So I guess we're just mom and daughter.
And, we're both like kind of cranky at times, and...
So, Kelly, you said crime as it relates to medical things, or just crime all by itself?
That would be a niche. Crime as it relates to medical abnormalities.
There's a large community, especially in the podcasting world, that crime as it relates to science and what you can gather about that. There are some that are just comical and they're interesting too.
Crime stories that are comical?
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah, there's goofy stuff all over the place. I mean, if you just look up Florida Man once, you'll laugh until you cry. Right. Serial killers, though, for me, the interest in serial killers is the whole psychology of it. How could somebody possibly do that?
Okay, that's what I wondered.
What sort of planning did they have to do in order to get away with it at such a volume for so long? It really, it creeps you out, and anything that creeps me out fuels a need to understand it better.
The ratings for like true crime shows and podcasts is like 78% women, something like that.
Yeah, that's so strange.
I think we're just constantly on guard in everyday society. So knowing we're not alone and being suspicious of everybody.
There has been so much serial killer stuff in popular culture since 1970 or something. That
No, I know.
I was wondering if it's the psychology or if you actually get down into how they kill people.
How they kill people is just as interesting. I just finished The Stranger Beside Me. Grace was very touched to know that I was reading that. The thing that creeps me out so much about Ted Bundy is he doesn't have a consistent MO. The way that he approached women, either entering their homes or feigning like he was disabled with a cast on his arm or his leg, or just, snatching somebody. He didn't stick to one method, and there wasn't a whole lot of, there was no DNA evidence. I mean, it was the 70s when he was doing this, and DNA testing really didn't come about until the 90s. And what creeps me out most is I don't think in a modern day court of law what they ended up convicting him on would have worked.
Would have flown now because the people need like more solid evidence like DNA.
Yeah. A tooth impression, a dental impression, those are thrown out constantly these days. Like they're not.
Oh.
And I actually did a search not too long ago. I was wondering, because it has bothered me for a while. Not that I think Ted Bundy was innocent, but just wanting more concrete. Like, yes, he did commit all of these crimes. And I couldn't find
That's another thing about Kelly Wall is that she's a librarian. She, of course, has to go and Google this thing to the nth degree.
I have to verify my facts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was trying to find if they had tested any of his DNA against his older crimes. And they did do DNA testing. There was a victim that they were not able, very, very sad, so very sad. They were never able to find her remains until he told them right before he was executed where she was placed. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 years ago that they did DNA profiling to confirm that it was her. Do
most serial killers torture their victims, or do some of them just kill them and walk away? And because everything you see in the media is like, that's a big component of it.
Yeah. I don't know what the percentage of that is,
Now I'm sitting here trying to rack my brain. Obviously, the high-profile ones are the grossest of them all, so you're going to hear more about them. I'm sure there are ones that didn't torture as much. They just kind of kill in passing and keep going. But then you get into the, do you consider a hitman for hire a serial killer, and getting into the terminology and definition of that, because they're just there to off them and move on, but there's definitely a psychological component.
They're just there for the bucks.
I don't want to think of James Bond as a serial killer.
Yeah.
He's acting according to the law.
Well, he's got a license to kill.
007.
Give him a break.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you know what? What's funny is the reason I thought of Kelly is because we have traded books, like, and so serial killer stuff, that's, very popular in culture, but the stuff we've traded books on, like, I think I gave you the book Stiff by Mary Roach.
I have it sitting right here.
I'm sure you do, because I don't have it anymore. But actually, I got rid of all my books.
I'll give it back. I'll give it back.
I just got rid of all my books. But anyway, that's a book that every chapter is about, like, what happens to people after they die, like from cadavers that are used for test dummies, in car testing, which I had no idea they used real. All you see are those little mannequins, right? They're not showing you the cadavers that they use. And so...
Yeah, that was a hard chapter.
It was, and then there's...
I gotta say.
There's one about head transplants, right? Where someone has experimented with head transplants, not of people yet, but of monkeys, but they're talking about it in regards to people. And, it's so...
But they'd actually put cadavers in those cars when they crash them?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, who knew, right?
And you got a significant result from that? I mean, how old were they? It seems like some of that would be compromised by the
age?
Rotting corpse.
Oh, I think they're.
Well, they refrigerate them and slow down decomposition.
It's not like they're exploding like a dead whale.
Yeah. They put them in a suit and contain everything. It's pretty thorough in Mary Roach's writings on the topic.
Something came up on my YouTube feed, new research that indicates brain activity after death, after the heart stops, after a person is absolutely clinically dead, but they've detected brain functioning.
Really?
Not like they're aware of anything, but it does go on longer, apparently, in many cases than the rest of the body.
Really?
Does. And I thought, I don't know, it made me think.
Isn't that like where you read about people asking, like if someone was beheaded, right? Like on the guillotine, right. Are they still alive for a few seconds? Do they know what happened to them? And isn't there like something where one of the heads winked or something?
There was a medical physician, I believe, during the Reign of Terror in France. So when the guillotine was used at its height, right? And he had his assistant there, sitting right there where the head was going to drop. And he said, I'm going to blink as many times, count as many times I blink after my head falls into the basket. And I think it was 17 times.
No way.
Now, is that the brain still working and having thought and telling it what to do? Or is that just electrical synapses finishing firing?
Right. Maybe they started blinking before the axe came down so that it just continued.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
But I heard that YouTube thing and I thought maybe cremation is not a good idea. Suppose you're still conscious when they slide you into the oven.
Well, do they do it? I don't think they do cremation that quickly, do they?
No, usually.
Like how long? When you say how long the brain is functioning, like. How long are you talking about? Like 5 days?
Well, that's what they didn't know. But they,
Okay.
They have all these accounts of people who say, I saw the light and I decided to come back. And,
yeah.
But then beyond that, they found a continuing function. So it's just an interesting thing. Suppose it does go on for a month. Supposedly it's not true consciousness, but it's kind of weird to think about that.
Oh my God.
It's interesting.
That's an Edgar Allan Poe story, right? I mean,
that is the reason why the practice of a 3-day wake exists.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1800s, there was a very serious fear of being buried alive. And a lot of the evidence we believe today, I say we as in the community, I'm not involved in the science or the study of it, I just consume it. A lot of the evidence appears that it's the natural degradation and decomposition of the body that makes it look like maybe it struggled to get out of the coffin, but in reality it was dead. But there are stories about, claw marks trying to dig out and everything.
Didn't people put bells in their coffins?
There were prototypes.
With the string above, that go above ground, right?
There were prototypes of it. I think it's a little contested whether or not they were really used to any extent. I mean, you had to be very wealthy in order to purchase one of those. A lot of people will say that the term "saved by the bell" comes from the ringing of the bell when you're buried alive. That is highly contested. I have also read, no, that's garbage. Don't even consider it. It's a boxing term.
Right, that's what I thought.
Oh, okay.
But it is fascinating.
I like the other one better.
I do too. I mean, it sounds great, right? Yeah. The early funeral parlors, they would have businesses that would lay out a corpse for viewing, but also for the purpose of making sure that they didn't wake back up. And the practice was 3 days before burial. And then, of course, they were stinky and smelly because embalming hadn't really taken off yet, which we could talk about embalming too. That's a fascinating process.
See, when Kelly says they're stinky and smelly, I kind of wince, but she doesn't. She smiles, right? She's like, yeah, they're stinky and smelly.
It's just the natural process, Grace. There's nothing to be squeamish about here. I live in Tennessee currently. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is a body farm in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And they do all sorts of studies to find out forensically how long a body will take to decompose under different conditions outside, and it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
You've been?
You've been there?
I've hung around outside. They won't let me in.
Does it stink?
Wally's a stalker of the body farm.
When we first started, you said several times what really creeps you out, as if that's a good thing. You like being creeped out? Is that your fascination with it?
When I was young, it didn't take much to creep me out, and it fueled anxiety, quite frankly. So one of the coping mechanisms that I've developed was, well, let's go learn about it, and it'll become less creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's a lot of science that plays into it. There's a lot that different cultures will find acceptable that gives you a sense of it's not so strange, it's not so macabre, it's not so gross and creepy. And, Edgar Allan Poe, love him, but oh my God, did he fuel a lot of what terrified me as a child. When in reality, there are cultures that find it completely normal to keep your dead in their homes for months, years.
I just read about, I can't remember where they are, about a culture that they bury their dead and then they dig them up after like a year or something like that and have this kind of ceremony with them.
I heard that too.
Yeah. Was it in the New York Times maybe or something? I don't know where it was, but
it could have been.
I had never heard of anything like that.
Caitlin Doherty, I hope I'm saying her last name right. She's a mortician, and she runs a crematorium and a funeral home, but she studied a lot of funerary practices, and she wrote some fascinating books. And one of them is on that subject, and they will actually keep the deceased person in their homes for years.
Wow.
They'll sleep right next to them because in their culture, it's a belief that they are still alive. They're just in a different state. And then eventually they will bury them. They kind of embalm using tea because there's tannins in tea that help preserve the body. And then they'll bury them, they'll pull them back out, they'll redress them, they'll clean them up, they'll pay their respects, they'll say, "Hi, Dad, how you doing?" And they'll put them back into their internment. It's studies like that have really helped me come to terms with my fear about death and the dead.
Oh, good luck with that. Jeez.
Well, in today's society, you put them in the ground, you walk away, and, how many of us are good about going and visiting the cemetery where mom and dad or grandma and grandpa are buried? I know I'm terrible. I live 5 states away from where my grandparents are. So in some ways, it's almost endearing how these other cultures approach their dead.
Yeah, maybe it makes things easier. I don't know. I mean, I think I told this story before, but one Christmas, for my Christmas gift, I bought, because I buy myself a Christmas gift usually, just a small thing.
I do too.
And I got Julian Barnes' Nothing to Be Afraid Of, which is his basically meditation on death, thinking it would maybe help me, because for some reason I had really been thinking about that stuff. Didn't help at all. Because I was hoping he was going to say, yes, I believe in the afterlife now. And I was going to say, well, if Julian Barnes believes in the afterlife, then of course there is one. But it didn't help.
You had mentioned, well, maybe cremation isn't a good option. And Grace, you brought up Mary Roach's book, Stiff. There was a grant study, I believe it was in Oregon. They were composting bodies as an alternative. And just this past week, Oregon legislature made it legal as an option to have your corpse composted.
I think it's a good idea.
I think it's really cool.
Because there's a local funeral home. They have a crematorium behind their thing, and the neighborhood has been complaining about it for years. And so they finally shut it down, and they have to move. And Luis is like, why do people why do they do that? He's like, just bury them and let them decompose.
Right.
Well, if Luis wants a very long and complicated answer, I can give him one.
I'm sure he'd be interested.
The problem with cremation from an environmental standpoint is just the amount of fuel that it requires.
Yeah.
Even when there's not a body in the retort, they're keeping that furnace fired up because it takes so much more energy to have it cool down and then restart.
It's like a kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they keep it going. Cremation, I think, is a great option for some people, especially when, in Japan, they don't have a lot of land to bury their dead. So I think it's 99% resort to cremation.
So what happens to them with the rapture? They're out of luck, I think, right?
Well, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We all become dust one day.
True.
Right.
I've always hated that. I'm like, come on, if you knew science, we all end up as dust.
Yeah.
We're just expediting the process. It's fine.
I think you can get it made into pellets or something.
I think I've heard of something like that, too. Or into diamond, like into a fake diamond, too, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah. You can be compressed into a diamond.
That's cool.
Don't fall for the tree pods. They cremate your ashes and put you in a pod, and then you're supposed to support and nourish a tree. Once you're cremated, there's no nutritional value left in your remains. It's not a viable option. But composting, on the other hand, your family can actually take back the dirt that resulted from your composted remains and throw it in a garden.
Yeah.
I tried to swing that one by Mom. She was a little creeped out by it.
Yeah, I don't know if...
She loves her garden, so I was like, Mom, we can nourish your garden with your own remains. She's like, just put me in the ground.
Yeah. My wife and I are all signed up for cremation and a little...
Are you rethinking it now?
I have second thoughts all the time about that.
They will also take cremated remains and make them into structures that coral can grow off of, which is also a very cool option. There are burial practices. There's a difference between conservation green and then traditional being embalming, and you're put in a cement vault, and which I've never really understood. If you're not getting buried back up, why do you have to go through such a process? And in cultures that don't have enough land, or countries, I should say, that don't have enough land for burial, it's a luxury in America that we take for granted, in my opinion. But conservation and green burials are interesting options where you're not embalmed, you're not put in a vault, you're not put in a metal casket, you're just put in basically a wooden box or a muslin wrap and placed in the ground. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'd rather do that.
The reason for the vault, if it's all for the manicure of the landscape of the cemetery that you're in, because as the body decomposes, the ground sinks. So the vault helps keep everything looking natural and level, and they don't have to go back in and fill in some dirt.
It wasn't just to prepare you for eternity. It actually had a function.
And embalming, I learned this recently. This is really interesting. Embalming really took off during the Civil War because there were so many soldiers across enemy lines that were dying on the battlefield, and families wanted to bring them back home, but the trains refused these dead, decaying corpses that were smelling everything up. They didn't want to take them back. So embalming became a really popular practice to preserve the body and get it back home. What I just learned, of course, in my morbid fascination, I've been holding on to this, and I got excited when Grace said we were going to do this podcast.
This is the first. She has not shared this with anyone before.
So I'll be really creeped out, I suppose.
Well, so
I hope.
There were doctors that were going to the battlefields right before a battle and handing out their pamphlets and saying, if you want your earthly remains returned to your family, keep this pamphlet in your coat pocket and we'll know to get your body and bring it back and embalm it. And morale sunk. Like, everyone just couldn't deal with it. And Abraham Lincoln had to put out a proclamation, like an executive order that said, do not go to soldiers right before battle and proposition them for business to embalm their bodies when they die.
Wow.
And any embalmers any doctors that wanted to embalm the fallen soldiers had to be enlisted as a doctor in the army.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they'd be that popular around the campfire the night before a battle.
It's like, oh Lord, here he comes.
Wow, that's intense.
You know, we always think of ancient Egyptian embalming practices. 5,000 years, there wasn't a lot of embalming, or different cultures had different.
Not that I'm aware of. Obviously, there are some cultures that, did it to a smaller scale. Nothing like the luxury of what the Egyptians would do. Mm-hmm. A lot of the mummies that you find are mummified by accident. Bog man. There's some really cool mummies in the Andes Mountains during the Incan reign, because the climate is so dry and the altitude where they were kept, they were naturally mummified. Those are fascinating. They are beautiful mummies.
When I think about one of the other like really advanced cultures, China, I wonder what they were doing.
That's a good question. I don't know. The cool thing about China, of course, is the terracotta army, and I think there's like tens of thousands of soldiers in that terracotta army. No two are alike. They are all individualized.
Are there actual people in those?
Yeah, that's what I wonder.
They're hollow.
No. Okay.
However, there are Buddhist sculptures, or not Buddhist, sculptures of monks that are sitting in pose, and there are the remains of monks inside, and the belief is that they are still alive and in that meditative state. Maybe they do have some brain activity going on hundreds of years later.
Your concerns about death, so you treat that by being interested in morbid topics. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair thing? And they creep you out. I mean, it's like watching a horror movie. It takes care of your fear. And so that's where it comes from.
Kind of, yeah. It normalizes it and makes it less creepy.
We talked about having a disclaimer. Can we get into some stuff where we should have a disclaimer?
Sure. I mean,
did you see how flattered she looked just now?
Now you're like really challenging me. Well,
oh boy.
Hopefully I can deliver.
Yeah. Just though, based on, just excuse me for 1 sec, based on what you just said, right? For some reason, none of those things help me at all. I am still, I watch a horror movie and I still cannot sleep. And I'll, 3 years later, I'll think of a scene from that movie and I'll be frightened. None of that helps me. Like, I cannot really even, I can only read about like serial killers a little bit now. I mean, some of it I know has to do with having a child, right? Because there are certain things, I was never really comfortable with reading stuff about kids and death before, but now forget it. I don't know. None of it helps me be less fearful.
Wow. So I always assumed that was the whole point of horror movies, that it gave you that safety valve.
Oh God, no.
That it just makes it work.
I am still, all the time, I always think of scenes from scary movies when I'm in bed or wherever. I go in the basement, I think of a scene from The Conjuring, and,
You're just so fearful in general.
Yeah, I guess. I have a very active imagination, I guess. Anyway, sorry. Go on, Kelly.
Oh, no. One of my favorite medical facts,
I have a very
this
active
does not have anything to do with death, but it does go down more of the medical oddities. And I think, Grace, this is probably an icebreaker I did with you, because it's my favorite.
An icebreaker.
It's really not appropriate in a lot of social circles.
That's what we're here for.
One of the advertised uses of Lysol. Yeah, Grace knows immediately. And you can go Google this. I'm not making this up. I learned about it in a history course in college. There are articles written about it. But in the 1920s, it was illegal to advertise contraceptives. And you could really get slapped on the hand with fines, and it was terrible. But, of course, people were using contraceptives without anything being sold to them. It's been a practice that's as old as time, basically. So in the 1920s, I think, through the 50s, one of the advertisements that Lysol would use, and please just do not do this at home, it's a horrible idea, But the advertisement would be, ladies, keep your house clean so your husband is happy. And it's basically telling women to douche with Lysol to prevent pregnancy or to clean up and get rid of any possibility that it could occur. It didn't work. It did not work. It was not effective at all. The solution back then was even stronger than it is right now, so it was not comfortable.
Ugh,
but yeah, there's
God.
a whole advertising campaign where they recommended that to women.
Wouldn't that be extremely painful?
Yes.
One would imagine.
I mean, modern science today tells women leave that area alone.
Yeah.
You don't need to be doing anything there.
I'm sure you could change the whole microbiome in that area. And
Yeah.
who knows, is right?
Yeah. I mean, dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
So yeah, don't do that.
Please do not. It doesn't work.
Charbroiled Chats does not recommend Lysol douching.
Yeah, right. We'll get them as a sponsor.
But the advertisements, beside advertisers recommending medical practices, which is never a good idea, but they're just so misogynistic and awful. It puts the blame on women. So they're fascinating if you want to go read them.
Yeah, and didn't we, I can't remember, I mean, another friend, a mutual friend of Kelly's and mine, maybe she did. Since I've known Kelly and this other friend of ours, I have read a lot of books about, God knows what, bubonic plague, and I just shared one with Kelly about the start of epidemiology that basically is...
I'm so excited to get that one.
Yeah, is basically traced to a cholera outbreak in London in the 1850s. And so those are the kinds of things that I have learned about since knowing Kelly and our other friend. It's kind of nice.
One book that I'm reading right now, which I will recommend to everybody, it's an extremely well-written book, is The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. In the 19 teens and 1920s, after the discovery of radium, they were painting watch dial faces with radium so they would glow in the dark. That became very popular during World War I because you could see it in the dark on the front.
Right.
The U.S. Radium Corporation hired a bunch of young women in their late teens, early 20s, and they would delicately paint each of the numbers on the watch dial face. But in order to get these tiny numbers painted, what they would do is they would take the tip of their brush and put it between their lips to get a fine point on it. And then they would dip it in the material that had radium in it. And they'd paint the dial, they paint the number, rinse their brush, point their tip, and dip again.
Gosh.
And they got paid by the number of trays that they did. It was actually a really good gig for these young women. It paid well. It was kind of a glamorous role to have. And at the time, it was believed that radium was really good for you. Radium, they claimed to put radium in just about anything from chocolate to toothpaste to condoms.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, go
Radium
follow
was in everything.
Oh yeah,
cocaine.
Exactly, just like cocaine. However, a lot of that was kind of snake oil salesmanship, which the etymology of snake oil salesman is also interesting. It was hard to procure radium. It's a difficult substance to extract. So a lot of them said they had radium in them when they didn't. But this material that they painted with, these women definitely were coming into contact with minuscule amounts of radium. And it took years for the effects of that to appear. It had never been identified as a poison before. And what radium does, if I spoil the book for anybody, I'm only halfway through and it's fascinating. What radium does is it gravitates to the bone just like calcium, and it lives there in the bone. And it causes anemia, it causes a lot of pain, and it deteriorates and creates holes in the bone. If you're a history major, if you've ever explored anything around, unions and safety protocols. They bring up this particular story because of the woman whose jaw fell out. And they're like, oh, we need safety protocols. And then every course I've ever taken moves on. And I'm like, I have to know more about this jaw that fell out of someone's mouth.
Her jaw just fell out. See, I thought, I haven't read it yet and I want to. And I knew that there was, a not a great ending to the fact that they were licking radium. But I thought it was carcinogenic, but that doesn't sound like the case.
Well, I wonder if it is, because my mother's multiple myeloma it's not the same thing by any means, but it does a similar thing to the bones in a way by creating holes. So maybe it is carcinogenic.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, at the time that all these studies were done, they didn't know a whole lot about cancer.
Yeah.
I always thought that from the time Madame Curie found radium, I thought the dangers were immediately recognized, and that putting it in chocolate and stuff sounds really...
Marie Curie's husband, Pierre, he kept a vial in his coat, I think, and had a reaction to it. So they knew pretty early on, but I don't know how well it was advertised. And these women, that the U.S. Radium Corporation, they're like, oh, it's minuscule. It couldn't have affected them. They're not in contact like with the men who are actually extracting it, which there were safety protocols for them. But so many of these women... And it's so far beyond what any history course I've ever taken has discussed about it. But I'll just talk about this woman whose jaw fell out, because I've always wondered, I'm like, how did someone's jaw just fall out? Yeah. It started with a toothache. And so she had the tooth removed. The dentist thought that was the best thing to do. And the area where the tooth was removed never healed. And so there's, a hole there. It's pussing, it's smelly, it's gross, and more teeth are getting affected. So she's losing more and more teeth. And the dentist, gently probed the area that hadn't healed, and the jaw broke and came out in his hand.
Oh, my God.
That dentist kept the piece of jawbone and put it in a desk drawer, and he would analyze it from time to time. That desk drawer had undeveloped x-ray film, because he would take x-rays of people's teeth, obviously. He was looking for some x-ray film, pulled it out. It was like, why are all of these x-ray films milky? It's because that jawbone was still radioactive.
Wow.
Years later. That poor woman died. Radium poisoning is lethal. As far as I'm aware, there is no cure for it. That poor woman died. They said she died of syphilis after a false positive. When they were going through the legal aspect of trying to sue the Radium Corporation and get some relief for these poor women who basically had a death sentence because of their occupation.
When was all of it happen? Would that have been then, like, so they were doing that during World War I, so this would have been what, the 40s and 50s then?
No, this is like 1925.
Oh, okay. I thought it took longer, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, they exhumed her remains, and when they pulled the coffin out of the ground, it glowed.
Oh no.
The coffin glowed.
Wow.
Grace, I read this before I go to bed at night, and I was like, oh, I have to share with somebody.
I am so happy about this.
Did it glow just at night, or were they pulling it out at night, or was there other creepy...
It was 3:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, my God. Wow.
That poor woman... Eventually, what the radium did is it ate away at her carotid artery, and she bled out in the most horrifying, like, out of nowhere, like, blood pouring out of her mouth. It was that poor woman, out of all of the women who got affected and the very sad stories that they tell, my heart goes out to her the most. It is a horrifying story what happened to her.
Well, that was...
enlightening.
That was pretty intense. What else you got?
You don't want to know.
Well, so we talked about snake oil salesmen. I'll just mention in Chinese Eastern culture, there is a snake that has medicinal properties. So they would take the snake and it would kill it, put it in some oil, and there were some medicinal properties to consuming that.
Oh.
However, in the America West, they would take any old snake, not the ones that were used in China, throw them into some oil, try to sell it, and that's where the term snake oil salesman comes from, because it didn't do any good. It was just phony advertising, basically.
Oh, that's interesting.
This one is fun. It's a little off color, but you all have both heard the term to blow smoke up your ass. Oh, go blow smoke up your ass.
Yeah.
Do you know where
Was that a treatment for something?
So drowning victims, the way that they would try to revive drowning victims was to actually blow smoke up their ass.
What's the basis for that? What is...
Have no idea, but it was a method that they would try.
Here's an idea.
It's probably, you could stick anything up a drowning victim's ass and it would maybe wake them up, right?
Wake them up, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
If they're still alive, they're going to have a reaction.
Oh my God, who knew?
Yeah, that was also, I shared that one with a coworker, and he is very tickled to hear that this podcast is happening, because he is actually one of my friends that gets excited when I have these little tidbits for him.
So somebody washes up on the beach or somebody drowns. People smoking cigarettes, they call them over, or do they build a bonfire, or where do they get the smoke from?
I know.
That's a good question. It was kind of a footnote in one of my books.
Did it ever work?
I don't think so.
Did it ever work? Because you'd think it was...
I don't think so.
Maybe the lifeguard stations kept little fires going.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Now, I might have to research that.
Yeah, I know which book it was in. I'll see if there's a footnote where I can go research some more.
Get back to us. Get back to us on that.
So 2 more facts about drowning victims.
Oh my God.
You know the CPR dummy with the face? So the face on every CPR dummy is actually a cast of a woman who drowned in the 1800s.
I have heard about her. I didn't know that was the cast of her, but I've heard about her.
She just had a very peaceful look to her, and the doctor was...
They call her something, right? She has like a name.
They do, and I don't recall what it is. That's just a fun fact.
So the companies that make the dummies just carried on that tradition?
Yep.
Wow.
So if you've ever put your lips to that face, she was a drowning victim.
Wow.
This one is gross. This is also one of my favorite fun facts. My friends have since told me that my facts are not fun, so stop saying that.
Kelly, I'm really proud of you right now. You are coming through on this.
Absolutely.
I had a list. I was like, I have to be prepared. And I actually have the little sheet. I have a calendar that one of my coworkers gave me of true crime fun facts. And I knew this one, but this one's really interesting, and so I kept it and I pegged it on my bulletin board in my office. But there's an area between Seattle and Vancouver where a whole bunch of dismembered feet kept washing up onto the shore. Where are all these feet coming from? Why is it just the feet? It wasn't pairs of feet. 10 different individuals and 7 people have been identified that these feet belong to. And so, of course, you think there's a serial killer on the loose because there's so many different victims. In reality, what the science determined was these people are either drowning victims or people who completed suicide, maybe jumped off a bridge or something like that.
Oh.
A dead body in the water will be consumed by the fish and the natural life that exists there. It'll get beaten up over rocks if it's in a current and turbulent area. And so with time, the feet would detach from the rest of the bones, just like everything else will, right? Bones are heavy and they will fall and sink to the bottom, but the feet still had their shoes on.
I was going to ask that. I was going to say, did they have shoes?
they still had shoes on. Because what person takes their shoes off?
Could you imagine seeing a shoe washed up on the beach and you're like, oh, look, a shoe, and then inside.
And inside is a complete human foot, because of course it's in the shoe, so fish can't get to the foot. God. The foot's intact, and the sole of the shoe causes it to rise to the top, and then it washes up onto shore.
But then, why doesn't that happen more often? Why is it that limited Vancouver?
Good question.
I mean,
currents?
Why don't most people who drown?
Yeah, I think there's just a perfect current in that area where things get washed out and then cycle back in. Maybe
there was early bungee jumping.
Yeah, right.
And that would snap off their feet.
Could be.
Could you imagine? It just snapped my foot right off.
I'm just theorizing, Grace. So I didn't do any research on this because I thought I'd have nothing. What could I find that you don't know, right?
So, there's always stuff I'm learning.
Well, one thing that occurred to me, though, is there a relationship between medical oddities and legends like vampires, werewolves?
Yes. Yes, there is.
Like a factual basis.
Well, so going back to being buried alive and digging up some of, in the vampire culture, you think the nails are still growing. Actually, your nails and hair don't grow after you die. It's the shrinking back of the skin that causes it to look that way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But there are, just from the natural deterioration of the body, it looks like blood is coming out of your mouth because, there's a lot of fluids that are seeping out and everything.
Oh.
In vampirism.
I just read that somewhere.
That's where a lot of that folklore comes from, is not understanding how the body naturally degrades and deteriorates and decomposes.
Are there people who have a thirst for blood? Or?
Well, isn't there that Elizabeth of Bathory?
Oh, are you talking about the one who bathed in blood?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a bit of a different tale. There is a disease out there that I believe it's low iron in their body, and they do claim that there are benefits of drinking blood. Usually it's animal blood. If they drink it at all, they're not drinking human blood. But they do have a sensitivity to sunlight and things of that nature as well. So that ties in very much so with the whole vampire mythology. And while that's actually a great segue, because the other etymology I wanted to bring up was hair of the dog. You drink the hair of the dog, which usually we acute to hangovers, hair of the dog, I'm hungover the next morning, let's just drink another beer quick, which never has worked for me.
You've actually tried it?
No, I've never had the stomach to. But the complete phrase of that is drink the hair of the dog that bit you. Because the belief was if you got bit by a dog with rabies and you could find the dog and get the hair from the dog, make a tonic and drink it, then you yourself would not get rabies. And rabies is a horrifying disease. It is extremely deadly. Thank God that there's a vaccine out there. If you think you have been bitten, go get the vaccine, because it is a horrifying disease. And I have a whole book about it because it's great.
Didn't they used to have to inoculate you in the stomach or something? Wasn't
3 shots in the stomach over the course of a couple of weeks.
But they don't do that anymore.
I was just talking to someone whose daughter had to get it because they had a bat in their house. And I can't remember if she said that they still give it there or not. And this kid was like 6 years old and had to get the shots.
Pray that you get bit in your extremities, not your neck or your face. Because what rabies does is it travels through the bloodstream up to your brain. And once it gets in your brain, then it's lethal. There's no hope of coming back from that. It does 2 things, which is really fascinating. One is the rabies virus is water soluble. If you can dilute it in water and pass it through, you're great. But the rabies virus makes you fearful of water. It makes you fearful of water, so you won't go anywhere near it. You won't go drink water because it would dilute it and wash it from your system.
Very clever, isn't it?
And then the urge to bite somebody and pass it on, because it's through the bite, it's through the saliva, it lives in the saliva and then passes through the bloodstream to get to the brain.
Oh my God.
And the virus actually communicates to you through your body that you should do this.
Yeah, it's actually painful. Not only do you have a fear, but it is painful to swallow water.
We got to get a virologist on here to tell us some interesting histories of,
There is a fascinating podcast called This Podcast Will Kill You, and they cover... This is where I learned all about rabies. I learned about pyrons, which causes kuru. I hope I'm saying pyrons correctly.
How do you spell it?
Pirons.
Never heard of it.
It causes mad cow disease and kuru. Oh. And what it is it's a protein. So unlike a lot of other diseases or afflictions that you can have that are usually a virus or a bacteria or a parasite, this is a protein that lives in your body. What happens is if you consume this protein, usually it exists in the brain. That's why you shouldn't eat human brain.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Yeah. Note to self, you can actually...
Don't stop eating brains.
You can actually eat human. It's not... From a nutritional standpoint, it's not as great as chicken, pork, or beef. So it's really... It's not a great source. It's hard to procure. You can eat it if you're desperate, like if you're,
on a plane in the Andes, and
right, or the Donner Pass, the Donner Party.
Yeah,
just don't eat the brain. Okay, don't eat the brain. If you're desperate and you've got a snack on somebody, avoid the brain.
What if you barbecued it? Would that help if you barbecued the brain?
So the thing about prions is it's a mutated protein that when it comes in contact with other like proteins, it mutates those proteins, and they don't know how, and they don't know why, and they don't know how to stop it. So if you get kuru, which is what it's called when it affects humans, and cows, it's mad cow disease, there's no cure. You go crazy, and you eventually pass.
Well, again, no more brain eating for me.
Well, on that happy note, another episode of Charbroiled Chats comes to a close. But rest assured, whatever you would like to talk about, we are listening. So go ahead, tweet us at @CharbroilC or email us at charbroiledchats@gmail.com. Of course, we'd love it if you'd head over to iTunes or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and write a review of Charbroiled Chats. And please, subscribe, like, follow, comment, and most of all, tell all your friends about Charbroiled Chats. See you next time.
Do you think Viking funerals are actually a thing, or was that just in Hollywood? To get the environment hot enough to cremate a body is very difficult. If you think burning down your house or burning a car with a human body in it to cover any evidence is going to work, it won't. It'll just char the body. It won't cremate it. I mean, it sounds really cool and awesome, and I wish it were viable, but I just don't think the science is there to back it up.